the ones I'm doing, maybe 5 or
Hmm.
6 this month, including John Sayles next week, which is going to be
Oh, that'll be
a
interesting. Yeah.
tremendous honor. Yeah,
Now,
I'm
has
stoked.
he written a book, or you just want to talk to him?
He's he's written a really wonderful new book
Uh-huh.
called "To Save the Man," and
Hmm.
and it's all about it's the 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre. It's a story
Uh-huh.
about that, but it's also counterposing that with this group of students at the Carlisle Indian School
Hmm.
who hear news of what's happened uh, out there on the the ghost dance and the end
Wow.
and how they react to it. It's a really I can't wait to talk to them about it.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, but I digress. Let's uh,
Ha.
good
Yes.
evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. It's always an honor and a privilege to welcome Walter Mosley, whether virtually or in the store. And Walter has a brand new book called Been Wrong So Long It Feels Like Right, which what a great title. It's the third book in the King Oliver series. And I was just sharing with him before. It is an amazing piece of work, and um, but there's a lot of spoilers that we can't get into, Walter, in this book.
Yep. Mm.
But I don't know. Yeah, I thought a good place to start, for the 3 or 4 people who haven't had a chance to read the first books in the series. Can you kind of maybe talk a little bit about the character in general, about King Oliver?
Well, excuse me. Joking Oliver um, comes from a place. He has a very strong family with very powerful kind of beliefs of right and wrong. His father, who was not really a criminal, but he was a street guy, not a hustler, he didn't steal things, but he lived with the people in the streets, and when he was when Joe was maybe
13.
13, 12, 13, 14. The father gets arrested for having a shootout with these two white guys, but it wasn't a shootout, they said. He robbed them and shot them, and he was sent to prison for a long time. And he was asked, like they knew that these guys were bent, and he said, turn in these guys, and you can go free. And he just goes, no, I don't do that. I don't snitch on nobody, man. That's not happening. And I'm not gonna send somebody else down. Well, his son Joe hated him. He just hated him. And the father's Odin, the son is Joe King. It's and then the mother gets she has a breakdown. She's put in a mental institution, and a few months later, the grandmother who and grandfather who he lived with tell him, well, she's dead. That's it. And the only thing he could think of doing was to become a policeman. He was going to become a policeman, and he was going to do that. He was going to do that job. And the problem is that he did it a little bit too well. It didn't matter who you were. If you were a person, you committed a crime, then you needed to go to prison. But if you were a cop and you were committing a crime, especially a superior officer, and doing that, well, Joe got framed, thrown into Rikers, and his whole life started to spiral. His wife left him. His he was he, they, the police really wanted him to die in prison. Send a cop to prison. I mean, not Rikers Island. And so, but he finally got out with the help of the guy who actually had betrayed him, and he became a private eye. And that an ex-cop, I've never written about an ex-cop being a private eye. I don't believe most of the most of the stories in the genre. They might be fun and I might read them, but I don't believe them. you know the idea of being thrown out of this family, which is the thing that Joe wanted more than anything, to be thrown out of that family and then to become private, and to be looked down upon and mistreated, but at the same time having this extraordinary family, has this daughter who's fantastic. He has his grandmother who, Grandma B, she's she's has such a strong will. Um, and so he's kind of in betwixt and between in New York City, and he knows New York wonderfully. And he has a good friend named Melquarth. If you don't know Melquarth was the Satan's original name. And he had Melquarth had a much harder life than Joe. But for some reason they're friends. You know, Melquarth, he's done every crime that you can commit, he has committed, but he's trying to do a little better. So I mean that's the setting, and he takes cases um, according to his moral compass. That's
Yeah,
it.
it's a classic. There are lots of kind of nods to classic PI fiction throughout. And Melquarth's wonderful church, what is it, a deconsecrated church that he's turned into this elaborate fortress kind of set up. Um, yeah. So I was going to say,
On Staten Island.
on Staten Island,
On
right?
Staten Island, yeah.
I was going to say I wanted to mention all the names in the book because there are some wonderful names. I mean, there always are in your books, from Soups for
Hmm.
Flies and all these great characters you've written about. But here are a few for you folks. Well, the father, Chief Odin Oliver, the son, Joe King Oliver, as we've mentioned. And in the beginning of the book,
Joe King Oliver was the mentor of Louis Armstrong in
right,
jazz. Yes.
you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And we've talked about jazz before, so I'll try not to get us in the weeds again. And we're both big
Hmm.
jazz freaks, but uh, there's a little part at the beginning of the book that um, I just wanted to bring up. It says, my middle name is King. My father named me that as an honor to both me and my namesake, King Oliver, Louis Armstrong's mentor. And then he says, Dad loved jazz, thought it was what distinguished Black identity in America and the world. And then the quote, jazz is the distillation of all the music of the world. What a great line.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
it does seem to be true. Hopefully it is. It seems like no matter what the music is, jazz can take it and say, okay, let's play with this. You
Yeah.
know, it could be a song from a musical. It could be something that Bach had been doing. It could be, a wooden flute, on the plains of, Kenya. Jazz can say, well, we're there. You know.
Yeah. Blues. You can definitely the blues.
Oh, definitely. Well, blues is like at least the great uncle of jazz, which is,
Right.
which is another thing.
Yeah. And the Brazilian
Ah,
music.
yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So what kind of gets this book started? He's summoned by his now 94-year-old grandmother. And what mission does she send him on?
Well, the book starts where he's meeting with a woman who has taken her child and run away from her rich husband on the West Coast. And while he's interrogating her, pretending to be somebody else, she's a non-sexual escort, and he's pretending that he's hiring her. He's hiring her to go with him, and he realizes while he's talking to her and while he's looking into her that she might not that he might be on the wrong side, that there might be something wrong with the man who's hired him, who he's never met, and she might be okay. And so that's the first thing. And he tells her all this stuff, and he sends her away. So then he goes back to his office. He thinks, okay, I've done a mighty good deed for the day. And there's his grandmother sitting there, and she says, Joe, how you doing? She, talking to Joe's daughter who works for him. They go into Joe's office. She says, look, I got a tumor. It's in between my heart and my lungs. And, it's a hard operation for anybody, but, I'm old. And he said, well, can I do anything for you? And she goes, you can find your father. And he says, well, Dad's in prison. All you got to do is Visitors Day, go see him. And she said, no, it turns out he's been out for 9 years and nobody knows where he is, but you got to find him. You either bring him to me or me to him because I have to see my son, you know. And, he hates his father but he has to turn away from that because he doesn't love anybody more than his grandmother. And so that becomes the case. How to find the father? Why is he hiding? What's wrong? There's a plethora of things, and all of these people who are really fun. His all the people of Joe's childhood. He ends up going to talking to looking for his dad, and even once he finds the dad, he has to figure out how to keep him out of trouble with the police.
Right. And it seems like there's kind of a theme going through the book about the effect that prison has, the lasting effect that it has on people. You know, we meet,
Yeah.
I mean, we meet lots of different characters as he's going around that have served time, and it's affected them in different ways.
Yeah, no, there really are. There's one guy, you know, everybody always talks about how cheap it is to work in China. So yeah, if you want to make things, you go to China and get those people to make it because they only cost you, X amount, probably the equivalent of $1 an hour, though they never give that much. But in most prisons, I think the highest paid job in the prisons is $1 an hour for people who do forest firefighting and stuff like that. But most people are making somewhere between 12 and 40 cents an hour. And one of the guys who Odin did shoot, but it wasn't. It was well, anyway, he was defending himself. One of the guys that he shot, though, who's now found Jesus, has come out and he started this giant company where he owns all of this labor. It's really kind of like the serf system, and so all of these people are working for him because there's a great, and when you have like over 2 million people working these jobs, it doesn't matter how much they're making. That's a lot of money, and what they make is an extraordinary amount of money. And so, this guy is, that's what he's doing. He has to work inside of capitalism. And even when Chief Odin was in prison, you know, he started a group that was not based on race. He started a group of guys, and he says, we're the unusuals or whatever. You know what I mean? We're the people who get along. You are going to leave us alone, whoever you is in that case. And you know, it's so much fun because when we think of things, we think of them in monolithic ways. What prison is like, what the army is like, what America is like, what North Korea is like. But whenever you get into it, there's always originality there, and I think more than anything, in the Joe Oliver novels, I'm looking for that originality. What's different? At one point in this book, Melquarth Frost, who's helping the woman that he's trying to do stuff with, um, the woman asked her, he said, "What's with that guy?" And he says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, he's saying he's going on safari in Kenya with a Kenyan." And he said he's lion hunting. And he says, "No, he's hunting lion hunters." And
Yeah.
then Joe goes, "Oh yeah, well that's Melkor there. And I know there must be somebody out there who does that. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like there's a world, there's a world of possibilities. And one of the things that I like in the books, all of the books I write, is to talk about those possibilities, to talk about what might be, and that could be in science fiction, that could be in crime fiction, it could be in the so-called literary fiction.
Mhm.
I had my book John Woman, when I wrote about a deconstructionist historian, because really the only way to be an historian is deconstruction. That's the only way you can do it. There is no history unless you know everything, and nobody nowhere in this universe knows everything. And so then you got to go, wow. So
Well, I love
have to make it up. What?
a great example you already talked about in this book was the character of Melquarth, that how he has all this, um, all these issues and problems and past, and yet he's trying to do better. That's the key,
Yeah.
he's trying to, and he's making some progress,
Yeah.
and yeah, no, I love that about him. And I interrupted myself because there some of the other names I wanted to bring up for you folks. We've got Finn Ferguson, Chrysanth Mafi, which is a
Hmm.
Gatormouth classic.
Yeah.
Uh, one of my favorites, Forthright Jorgensen.
Yeah, that's it.
Felix Korn is a good one. How do you come up with these names? Are they just in your subconscious and they?
I have no idea. Yeah. I mean, this. I mean, we've had this discussion before. And I equate my approach to writing to psychoanalysis in the way that, psychoanalysis existed to get rid of hysterical symptoms. It used to be that people thought hysterical symptoms only happened to women. But now then they realize what could happen to anybody. And after World War I, all these people had these symptoms, hysterical blindness, hysterical, paralysis, all kinds of things. And the great thing about psychoanalysis, you would just talk to these people every day, every day, every day. They'd make free associations. And after a while, the symptoms will go away. After a while, what would happen, it would plumb the unconscious because you're doing it every day. All of these ideas happen in that dinosaur brain back there, and then ideas come out the next day, and then you're talking again, and so you're moving forward. We don't have those kinds of hysterical symptoms that much anymore, and so psychoanalysis, to a great degree, it doesn't have a use for that. But Freud invented the unconscious, and so what you have is you if you write every day, when you wake up the next morning, you'll realize that all these ideas have come up in your brain that you had no idea were there, or you had forgotten, or are strange to you, whatever. And I think so. And when you keep writing, everything comes up: situations, names, that extraordinary room of sinners slash saints in Melquarth's church.
Yeah.
All the major saints who were started off being sinners. um it's just, yeah, all of this has to exist somewhere, because I know I'm not making anything up, really. I'm just finding it.
Well, you really get into some of that in
Yeah.
this
Touch.
right
Yeah.
here. Yeah. Can you say a few words about that, about this book?
Well, I wanted to write about. All right. Yeah, it almost sounds sad. I said I wanted to write about the universe. Because the universe is so big, and I know we keep on saying that there's a way to move faster than the speed of light, and and there's one movement in the universe that's faster than the speed of light. The universe is expanding so quickly that the outer edge of it is actually expanding faster than the speed of light. It's I don't know like what that means exactly, but if I have to be on the outer edge of the universe to move that fast, then I don't know how. I'm not going to ever get there. But if you go all the way back to the primal atom, everything is right there in that tiny little place, and that atom, which contains everything, also everything is within proximity. And so if these beings who are, in quotes, the gods of the universe, exist from one iteration to the next of the universe, and in those first few micro milliseconds of existence, they discuss what happened before, and what they want to happen the next time around. And if they find that the greatest uh, culprit, the greatest enemy of the way things are and will be, is the chromosome, is a molecule, um, then they may have to do something about that. they might have to do something about the chromosome.
Right.
And and that's what this book is. This is the first of maybe like 66 books I could write. I'm probably not going to, but about different representations of representatives of these gods, uh, and how by struggling against each other, they're going to make the kind of change that these beings whose thought processes are so much beyond us, we can't even understand what they're trying to do. We say, why don't you just change things? Why don't you make a difference? Said, no, no, that's not it. That's not how we do things, because that won't work. They understand things about the universe that I can't. And that my characters can't. But it's really fun, uh, just to have just to have those ideas and follow them, because then you if you can just kind of lightly touch um, somebody with this kind of uh, deification, uh, and see how they work with it. It's That's actually, what it's about. I mean, we think it's about science, and we think it's about philosophy, and we think about, everything is based on us. As a matter of fact, whenever I talk to people about this book, they say, well, this book is about how the great secrets of the universe realize that man, or if they're really, advanced, they say humanity is the problem. And I said, no, 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 it's the chromosome that's the problem. It's not one little element of the chromosome. It's life itself. And it's really hard for people to understand even that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you actually kind of touch on this at various points in your work, other places, in
Mm-hmm.
subtle little ways. Like you're talking about looking at the universal through the individual,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. And you talk about how you can see the entire universe within a single person's eye or an
Mm-hmm.
animal's eye. I love
Well,
that idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun to play with. I mean, it's one of the great things about writing is you can be so creative and limitless, which it, I mean, you can imagine no limits. You yourself can't be limitless, but you can imagine no limits, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
And the rules, the rules. Well, you begin to understand. Well, you don't even know what the rules are. And of course, I talk to people. When you say things like, look, the thing that's so wonderful about science fiction, especially, and so political about science fiction,
Mm.
is that, for instance, you can say in the year 2184, there were no human males left on the face of the earth. You just get rid of the whole gender, like just in a sentence. Just write that down, and that's true. You can go from there. So okay, now what are you going to do now? But that's science fiction is the easiest place to see that. But you can do that in anything. Me making up a guy who's this crazy criminal who goes to Kenya to kill lion hunters. Well, like that's and it's not it, anything that you can think, anything that you can imagine, you can at least try to do.
And so yeah, Melqarth, obviously he showed up one day. And he just did not exist the day before,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
And you pulled him out of your subconscious somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just a guy. It's so much fun. I mean, in the original book, what happened was when Joe was still a policeman, even a uniform, he was working with the government on these people who are doing the robbing these banks, but breaking into the banks and stealing it, and they put him way out at the outer edge in downtown Manhattan to look for somebody trying to get away, and he sees somebody climbing out from the sewers. The police are chasing him, and he puts cuffs on him, and he locks him to the grating, and once there was no proof that he'd been part of the job. and there's nobody on the job who turned him in. And so the police asked him to lie, to say that he admitted that he had just tried to rob the place, and they gave him language for it. And he said, "I'm not doing that. I arrested him, fair and square, and I will say what happened. He was climbing out of the sewer, and I locked him to a grate. That's it, you know." And years later, Melquarth turns up at his office when he's now a detective, and says, "When you did that, you changed my life." He said, "Because you're the first person who ever treated me fairly." He said, "You didn't have to love me or like me or know me. You didn't have to try to help me. All you had to do was not lie." And that, I mean, these are things that happen in life. And you feel like if you can put that in a book, then somebody else can imagine it too.
Yeah. Now, did he first appear in book two, or was he?
No, it was book
He was
one.
book one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so crazy.
Yeah. Great character. Now, um, Joe's grandmother has a new boyfriend, or fairly new boyfriend. This guy named Roger Ferris.
Right.
Where does he come from?
Well, I just he's Roger Ferris owns all the silver in the ground in the world. He is the richest man in the world by far, a little bit over like 900 billion back in the first time that he appeared. So he's probably even more now. He's like a year or so younger than Grandma B, but just when he for a little while he was put away in this old folks home. She was there too, but when he got to meet her and talk to her, he just it it just gave him this view of life that was like so wonderful and beautiful. And here's this black woman, from the deep South, who's done everything that he hasn't done, and he's done everything that she hasn't done, and they really, really like each other. And I think by now they've become lovers, but that's taken a few years.
And we get it. He has this massive kind of compound in the city, and
Yeah,
uh, grandmother's room is this wonderful small recreation of her, what is it, her home back.
her cabin in Tennessee. I think Mississippi. Her cabin in Mississippi. You know, um, it's again, it's just so wonderful. And the one thing that's the same is she took the door from her house when she left, and
Right.
she brought that to put on the thing. And that's at the end of this long hall of paintings, many of which are paintings by famous painters that nobody has ever seen. That because there are a lot of great pieces
Yeah.
of art that very rich people who've been very rich for a very long time own, and you will never know that they have it. Every once in a while they let somebody see it, say, "Oh, there's a Cezanne that I know you haven't seen before. I have it on a wall in the room downstairs." I mean, you know, and it, from the poverty of that door in her house, in the woods of Mississippi to um the greatest wealth that you could imagine. It's all the same thing, really.
Mhm.
And that's what's I mean, I think that's one of the purposes of fiction. I think in the heyday of fiction, it's when you have people like Huckleberry Finn and Long John Silver and the Three Musketeers, and I mean you make up a world that people can imagine, and they almost put that world on like clothes, like a suit of clothes.
Right. Now, we can't really say a whole lot more about the book because people haven't read it, but
Yeah.
and I want to get on, there's tons of other stuff I want to bring up that I know people are curious about. Um, but I want to get back to the title. Been wrong so long it feels like right. And my question for you is that that comes in the book, as you will discover, folks, and it's a great scene, a really climactic scene in the book. And did the title for the book reveal itself to you as you wrote the book and you said, there it is right there? Or did you start with the title and say, you know what, I got to put that in somewhere. I'm going to keep that in my back pocket.
Well, there was a book written, I think for was it by Farina? It was a novel
Oh,
written in the mid '60s.
Richard
Uh,
Farina.
it's
Yeah,
been down so long, it looks like Up to Me.
right.
I remember that title. I read that book just because of that title. I remember, and it was a really dark book, but it was really fun too. And I think what happened was, I I I think I came to the place where I wrote, "Been wrong so long, it feels like right." And I remembered the title. And I said, "Oh my God, and it's not the same word. So I don't feel like I'm ripping off the title. I'm just using that sensibility.
Mhm.
Like a lot of times poets, will look at a 200-year-old poem and rewrite it in the kind of
Sure.
a modern way. And so I just, so it was that. I didn't know what the book was going to be called. I used that sentence. I remembered it as a title or a relative of a title, and then I put it on the book from there.
Yes, it sounds like it could come out of like a Charlie Patton song or,
Hmm.
some traditional blues, something like that.
And
Um,
it really is Joe, the life that Joe, lives through. You know,
yeah,
it's just, it's that whole thing. You have somebody like the grandmother who just she believes in right and she believes in wrong, and he says, listen, the best people, your worst enemies, and the worst people have the deepest love. I mean, you just feel that in his life as he moves forward.
right. Well, it's interesting, but we were talking a little bit about sort of what a little bit about what's going on in the world, and we won't get too into that, I guess. But you yeah, you said that, I actually see there's always a positive spin. There's always positive things that could come out of it.
Yeah, I think that there's natural. We often talk about how knowledge before 1914 doubled every century, and now knowledge doubles about every 10 months. As knowledge doubles, your experience doubles because some of it is in theory, some of it is in practice, some of it is in technology, some of it is in the in physics. That everything changes and it changes fast, and that's a and I think that we're living in that world. We're living, we've always lived in capitalism, but we don't live in the same capitalism that was around 150 years ago. Uh, Capitalism naturally, uh, congeals around more and more powerful groups and companies of groups. I'll just say that, and so you have kind of a natural tendency toward oligarchy, you know, and and uh, and I think that most people don't understand that. Most people say, "Well, everything is equal, everything is fair. People work hard," and they give you examples, that somebody who worked hard. But in the end, I think it's very likely that we and others will learn, Americans, but other people also will learn what it's how much the working person has in common with all the rest of the workers. And the oligarchs will have somebody like Ronald Reagan who says, okay, let me get rid of the unions, and the workers won't have a pot to piss in, basically. And but I think as people explore their own creativity, as they say, rather than being told what exists, they decide for themselves what exists. And as you decide for yourself, you'll see you have more in common, with some Mongol, on the desert, than you do, with the owner of Apple or Microsoft or Amazon or and I'm not picking on those companies, any
Right.
company. Yeah.
Sure. Right. Which leads me to, and then we'll move on. Gladstone, in your new
Um,
book, Character of Gladstone.
Gladstone Palmer. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell them what he's all about? I really
Well,
loved him.
well, he's very interesting. He's Irish, very Irish. and he's a cop and he's a dispatcher. He's not a, he's not the, the chief of police or the captain or, some, great force. He's like one of those people who keeps the wheels greased. And sometimes that's, obeying the law and enforcing it. And sometimes that's breaking the law and doing something that makes something else happen. Uh, and he's like, to use that term that teenagers once used, he's Joe's frenemy, greatest frenemy.
Yeah.
He helps Joe, he hurts Joe, he even in this new book, the job he got looking for the woman, uh he got, from Gladstone. But at some point along the way, he says, I don't know why I believe that Gladstone would do something for a good reason. He only does stuff, for money to help himself and his friends, and so I have to think beyond him. Gladstone is very smart and he knows everything. He'd be a great enemy. At one point, Joe wonders about Gladstone because um, Gladstone likes a woman that Melkworth is dating, and uh, he just says, "God, I wonder if those two came up against each other, what would happen?" You know, it's that kind of power of personality, which Joe has too.
Yep. Well, and Joe's got his, I don't know if you'd call it an Achilles heel, but his weakness is women, right?
Yeah, he likes women.
He likes the
And
women.
even when he doesn't do anything about it, his weakness is women. That's the thing. That it's just not, oh, it's not going out seducing women and one after another, and that's the problem. Even if he's not doing it, it's still the motor that keeps him running, and he knows it, and hopefully he's going to get a little better with Leaf Alessandra Morton, but we'll have to see.
Another great name. Yeah. Well, we'll move on, but everybody, you need to read this book. And if you haven't read the earlier two, go out and pick those up as well. Although you really don't need to read this.
No.
It gives enough hints of what's gone on before that it'll pique your interest. But terrific series. And so what everybody, a lot of your fans, of course, first became aware of you, like I did, with Easy Rollins.
Mhm.
Real groundbreaking series, starting post World War II Los Angeles. And over the years, you've given us a real chronicle, not just of a man, but of a country and of a city, Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Um, in You'll all be gratified to, well, the last one that came out last summer was Farewell Amethystine. Is that right? Amethystine?
Yes, I call her Amethystin, but there's
Amethystine.
yeah, right.
Um, and so now you'll be happy to hear there's a new book coming out, a new one coming out this September, which
Yeah,
is
Great
called
Dawn. Yeah.
Great Dawn, right? So
Mhm.
you're in 70s Los Angeles.
72, yeah.
Um, yeah, I know, I don't know, a question about research, but going back into that period in time, do you have to do much in the way of research?
Not a lot. Because I think that if you open yourself up to human nature, if you open your heart up enough to human nature, in the way that you understand it and the way that it understands you, through other people, that you know you write a story, and then when you finish writing the story, you look at it and you say, is that possible? Did that really happen? And sometimes it doesn't matter if it didn't really happen. But if it makes a difference, if it somehow contradicts what you're trying to say, or what the audience would perceive, then you change it. And that's a kind of research, but it's like research after the fact.
So in 72, I mean, this is obviously you were a young guy. You're probably in
Mm-hmm.
your early
20.
teen. You were
Yeah,
20.
20. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you were in Los Angeles?
By then I had moved to Vermont. But
Okay.
I'm
Uh,
always an Angelina wherever I am.
sure. Right. Um, Now for until 2023, I think you wrote for FX's Snowfall series, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There
yeah, yeah.
was 6 seasons, is that right?
Seven, six, 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 six. Yeah, six. Yeah.
And I guess I know you don't look too far ahead, but that series, of course, was all about the 1980s in Los Angeles and the arrival of crack cocaine
Hmm.
into the country and then the city. Um, do you think Easy will make it into that era? Do you have
Oh
plans?
yeah, I think he'll be there. Yeah, yeah, I think so. Because that'll be fun, and he'll be, but in his 60s, so it's
Yeah,
okay.
he's a young
Yeah,
man.
because he's born in 1920, so 1980 he'll be 60. And he'll still be able to to get around.
Sure, you could take him into the 90s, right?
I can, and
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
yeah. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what happens in the Easy Rollins book, Grey Dawn?
Well, Grey Dawn, it happens a year or so after he'd fallen in love with Amethystin, and she he did something that didn't break her heart, but it broke her down, and she had to leave. And she left. She went to Alaska, so she's been in Alaska, place that And I just this is another thing about creating things. This is a Black woman from New York and has never really been much outside of New York. Every once in a while, she might have gone on vacation or something, but she's never, ever, ever been to Alaska. But she goes there, and she's living there, and it's he's I'm completely depressed. He's lost this woman, and um, he lives, he lives in what we would call a gated community. It's a community of 6 houses on top of a mountain that's owned by one of the richest women in California. And she keeps him around because it's good to keep somebody like Easy around. They can be helpful in the worst of times. And this woman has hired a father and 4 or 5 sons who protect the mountain, and they're all Sicilian, and they'd been in a big kind of clan war uh, for some years, and decided to leave instead of just dying and falling apart and killing. And Easy is really depressed, the 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 father talks to him and says, "Well, what's wrong?" He said, "Well, man, listen, everything is terrible. I feel bad. I could stay in bed all day. Food doesn't taste good to me anymore." And he said, "Well, that's us. That we're fathers. That's what we do. We give up everything for our children. That's what we do." And and so the idea appeals to Easy, and Easy says, "So what should I do?" He said, "Well, go back to work." And he does. He gets in the car and he goes down. The first person who walks in and says, "I want you to find somebody," Easy knows he's lying. He knows he's lying to him. And he says, "Okay, you know, um, fine. I'll go find your aunt that your grandmother wants to see from this town in Texas that I know does not exist." And it just gets him into this, this crazy fight between billionaires, in the 70s. And um and somewhere in the middle of it, Amethyst comes back. And and it's a choice. You meet somebody and they smoke, and you come up to them, you're really smart. You say, "Well, listen, man, you smoke cigarettes, it's gonna kill you." And he said, "Man, I'm gonna die anyway. I could be smoking a cigarette and you could go out there in a car and die in an accident. So he said, I smoke and I've decided to smoke, and that's okay." And I think that Easy feels the same way about Amethyst, you know. And there are other characters who show up from a long time ago that have a big impact on Easy's life.
Mouse,
And huh? Oh yeah,
mouse.
Mouse is always there. Mouse is, I'm so happy because Mouse's girlfriend is, you can't even say she's an ex-Viet Cong. She was in Vietnam, she was Viet Cong, and she somehow got made her way to America, and she and Mouse are together, and she's pregnant. You know, Mouse doesn't do anything really in this book, but it's just fun to it's fun to um,
How about Fearless?
oh yeah, Fearless is there. Fearless is helps helping easy. You know, Jackson Blue is there. Paris Minton is there. His daughter, she's away most of it. Jesus is back. Jesus is in trouble. He's in serious trouble, and and Easy has to, while he's doing everything else, has to help him out. That brings in Mama Joe, which is, you can't really have Easy without Mama Joe, Easy and Mouse without Mama Joe. The characters are all there, and it's a lot of fun. And John the bartender, and there's a big party at the end. Say that,
That's great.
the
Wow.
big party at the end.
So is that all edited and ready to go?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. What else you got in the works? I know you are always have a million projects going.
Well, I wrote a book called Galen, A Romance in Black, and it's a black romance, which uh, it's a romance in the modern term of people being in love, but it's also the romantic movement starts just like just around 1900, a little bit before, maybe 1880 on up, where all the time before, people are writing novels about kings and queens and pirates and generals and noble savages, and you have to be something special in order to make it into a book. And you have people like Zola and a lot of other people start writing novels saying, "Well, I just want to write about everyday people." Charles Dickens. I want to write about everyday people and what their lives are like. Poor people, working people. And this book is also that it's about black people being in love. Starts off with a guy who is very smart, but he's on the spectrum, and his life is very, very controlled. And he meets this young black woman who's getting her MD from UCLA, and she falls in love with him, and they have this son, Galen. And Galen is he's wonderful. It's like he could do anything, but that's not to say he does no wrong. He gets into trouble, but that's life. And it's so much fun to write I mean, it's a straightforward romance. I mean, it's like, I mean, bad things happen, but bad things happen everywhere. There's no novel that exists that's not a crime novel. That's what I believe.
That's
I'm
interesting.
probably
Yeah.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
But mostly they are. And but it's really that book, yeah, and that's finished, and that's at Amistad Press, and
Cool.
it's going to come out in sometime after the next season.
Very cool. Now, be still my heart. One day he's coming back. I know it.
Oh yeah,
I keep
yeah,
waiting for Socrates, as I'm sure a lot of you guys do. Uh, he'll return.
yeah. I need to find. I need some free time to to concentrate on that. I've been working hard. I've been working on it. I'm working on that television show with Sterling Harjo. He did Reservation Dogs, and that's been fun. And I have a movie coming out based on The Man in My Basement
Oh,
uh,
really?
at the end of this year. Yeah, uh,
Wow.
and
That's one of my favorite books you've ever written.
why? Thank you. Hey,
Yeah.
it's fun. I think the film works. It looks good. And then I'm doing a few other things. I'm trying to do some work with Chaka King, and about doing Chester Himes novels, like for television, series,
Wow.
one novel at a time. Digger Jones and Kaufman Ed. Um, and
I like how you have Joe carrying the old paperback of For Love of Imabel
yeah,
in this book.
yeah, right. That's why, because I started working with Shaka, who, did uh Jude, what's it called? Judas, I forget titles so often. There's so many of them in my head. But anyway, he's a wonderful director. And I'm trying to do some other, stuff. It's just, I never thought about retiring before. So I have to, make some money. So, basically not, I don't have to save any. I just have to get out of debt. And, so I'm doing these things, but as soon as all of that is taken care of, which would take a couple of years, um, then I can write about Socrates.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Let me kind of go because we have a lot of questions here. People are
Uh-huh.
asking. Um, People are asking, what are your favorites, Patrick, of your books? So many of them. John Woman, big favorite. Man in My Basement. Um, there's so many. I mean, what I respect so much about Walter is that he's always, you're always trying new stuff, doing new things. And so yeah, I love all of his stuff. Okay. Robin asks, Walter, did you ever hear Roy Hargrove Quintet in person?
No, I have not. I haven't.
Is it a
I'm
very
sorry.
specific question?
Yeah,
Yeah. Did you
no,
see a lot of in LA? Did you see many of the great jazzers when you were growing up?
not really. Not really. I mean, you know, the music scene, was confusing to me, because concerts had had a lot to do with drinking and drugs and laughing and sex and I like all of those things, but not with my music. It would be almost like I would have had to been a musician to like spend a lot of time. Today in Tulsa, Taj Mahal was in town, and Sterling, who's the showrunner and creator of the show, was interviewing him for something else, and but I mean, I've seen a lot of jazz musicians, play, but I just no.
Did you
Sorry.
develop an appreciation for jazz when you were a really young man, or was it more rock and blues and soul and
Well, yeah, and it's so hard to define jazz. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly.
Like I was talking to a guy the other day that said, well, Fats Waller wasn't a jazz musician because he played stride piano, and stride piano is a blues method. And I'm like, you think that Fats Waller wasn't jazz? You
Or
know?
Louis Jordan or somebody like that.
Yeah, it's like, and then you have somebody like Ella Fitzgerald who, oh my God, and Ella Fitzgerald kept, moving back and forth, from pop to jazz because just her voice and people play with her. And a lot of other people, Billie Holiday's between blues and jazz, going
Mhm.
back and forth like that. And, but that's what the thing is. Jazz has a finger in every pie. That's just what it is. And it's not. It's a language more than it's a system. You know.
Interesting. Yeah. And then you get somebody like Thelonious Monk who just blows it all out of the water, right?
Yeah. I
Talk
talked
about
to
a
I talked to
one-off.
his son one day, and he was saying that sometimes his father would uh he'd wake up and he would play Bach. He had all the music, and he'd play Bach for 8 hours. And just yeah, it, and it's true, right? It's true that he was, and really, even in Bach's own era, there weren't that many people who understood what he did. They loved it, but they didn't understand what he did. And that's like you just say, wow, it's this is, and I think to a great degree that the oppression that Black people went through, and not only Black people, was it turned the iron of jazz into steel. You know what I mean? It heated it up, and it gave it such strength.
It's really interesting to see how it evolved into the late 60s, and
Mm.
kind of going out of the bebop era and then into this other, you know, crazy
Yeah, well,
space.
and coming out of I'm really honestly, so much of jazz comes from Louis Armstrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you listen to Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong, uh, everybody, all the greats, they heard him once and their whole lives changed. And what is it that he knew? How did he figure that out? As a juvenile delinquent in Louisiana, in New Orleans. It's just kind of amazing. But even when I say that, though, when I say so much of it comes from him, I'm not saying he created it, because it was in all of these people's hearts, ready to come out. But Armstrong, he was the match.
Yeah. It's amazing how these people appear for very brief moments in time. Like you get someone like a Charlie Christian,
Hmm.
just comes up and it's like, then he's gone. Or you get an Eric Dolphy who shows up,
Hmm.
just explodes everything, and then he's gone. Um, but let's see. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm neglecting your questions, folks. And there's a really, this is a really good question.
What's that?
Our friend Stefania, who always tunes in from Italy, and I realize we're running a little bit late, but her question is, I'm really curious about what a writer about how a writer answers this question. Um, what does a book represent for you?
Hmm. Well, it's such a
It's a deep question, really.
well, and if you could come at it from so many different ways. I mean, when I was a little kid and I would see a book, I would imagine some great magical adventure where all of these things would be happening somehow, again, magically in my head. I mean, that's what I thought as a child. Um, like, or I can think like I'll be talking to somebody and they'll say, "Wow, I just read War and Peace." And I said, "Oh, wow, how many times have you read it?" And they go, "Once." I said, "What? So you haven't really read it, right? I mean, you can't read a great novel like War and Peace, once. I mean, you can't even read a minor novel, and just once and think you got it. The same thing's true with movies, television shows, pieces of music. I mean, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But and so you think that it starts off as a door, but it gets deeper and deeper and wider and wider and deeper and deeper. That's the best novels. But even middling novels, can take you to places that you never imagined. I talked to a guy one day who said he was a driver. He's driving me somewhere. And I told him I was a writer, and he said, "What do you write?" And I said, "I write, mysteries, crime fiction, stuff like that, and other stuff." And and he said, "Oh, I never let my son read trash like that. They have to read good books, as
Someone
if."
really said that to you?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
But he was just being honest. I mean, he wasn't, I didn't feel in any way insulted by it.
Yeah.
And when we had a long conversation, I was trying to explain that the, the what's important about novels are not in the book, but in the mind of the reader, right? How you take those words, how you translate them into your own experience, how you learn from them. And no matter what you read, whether it's the Bible or the Fantastic Four, you're gonna you're gonna start creating things, very similar things actually, in those two kinds of books. So I mean, I'm in a way I'm saying I can't answer the question because there's so many different ways um, to come at it. But books are amazing. Books are just words in black and white printed, and you're reading it and you're seeing people's faces, and you're having emotional, erotic, frightful experiences. Uh,
Mhm.
and you're seeing things, but everything you're seeing, you're making up.
Well,
They're not in the
it's
book.
fascinating. Yeah, I mean, can't you go back and chart your own development, your own intellectual development by a series of books? It's like, okay, and then I found this,
Hmm.
and then that took me here for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it exists even for people who don't read. And that's the other thing, because readers tell stories, talk about things, make movies, they write songs, they do all kinds of things that bring us along. It's because we're like a semi-social animal, you know.
Well, Sally Ann McCartan comes in to save the day. She says, Judas and the Black Messiah,
Oh yeah, that's the name
Stephen
of that
King's
that movie
previous
that
movie.
Shaka did, right? Yes.
Yeah, love Sally Ann. Um, well, I've kept you late, Walter. Let me just see if there's anything in particular. Uh,
Uh-huh.
okay, yeah, here's another question. Does technology make it harder to create a crime story today, or just create a story today?
Huh. I don't think so. I think that it's something that you have to deal with. If you're writing, if you're writing a novel, there's always things that get in the way. Like for instance, you know, if I write the first sentence of a novel I write is uh in 1892, uh, uh, Josh Benz, the first black president of the United States. Well, I know for a fact that either into science fiction or fantasy, because you know there was no black president of the United States in 1892. That's kind of why black people and oppressed people in general tend toward science fiction and fantasy. That's why Octavia Butler's so important. Because how do I put somebody in a place that they tried so hard to keep us out of?
What
And
about
technology
Chip
is the same
Delaney?
thing. Hmm?
I was going to mention Chip Delaney, who's always
Oh my
neglected.
God. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's something else.
Baldwin, classic. Okay,
Babel 17. Yeah.
final question. I just had somebody kind of have a cool and a little story saying I took my old cassette player to listen to Monk on my first trip to Paris. It seemed perfect. Indeed, I bet it was. As a final question, when did you first start writing stories? When you were a little kid?
No, no, no. I didn't start writing until my mid-30s.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't. I would think about writing. I would, everyone. When I was a kid, kids want to do everything. So, I thought about it. But I didn't think of myself as a writer until I wrote, that sentence on hot sticky days in southern Louisiana. The fire ants swarmed. I wrote it while I was working as a computer programmer at Mobile Oil on 42nd Street in Manhattan on a Saturday when there was nobody else there. And because I got tired of writing with the program, I just wrote that sentence and I said, well, that sounds good. And I knew it was fiction because I'd never been to Louisiana at that time. I'd never seen a fire ant. And so I was making it up, even if it was, somewhat realistic. Um, and, but like I started then, now I'm 73, but I've published 60, 62 books. So something like that. So I have not stopped writing since I wrote that sentence. So that's, you know,
How long before you were able to do it full time?
um, I think let's say I started in 84, and my first book got published in 90, so that means that book got bought in 89. So yeah, 5 years before I was able to, make, I'm not eke out a living, but make a minor, living on, writing books and
Well,
publishing.
Devil in a Blue Dress was a huge success right out of the gate, wasn't it?
It was big, but I didn't, but not, big, big, big. It's
Yeah.
not, there's certain kinds of fiction that, do really well, because of because it can speak to such a broad audience. I speak to a broad audience, but over a long period of time. And because the books they're not challenging in a way that they're not. I'm saying they're not hard to read. It's not like you're reading Shakespeare or something. Reading them would have been fine.
Language isn't
Reading
a
it now,
barrier. Yeah.
yeah. But at the same time, the ideas and the morality and the choices that people make are challenging. And in that, that there's a slower kind of build to it, which doesn't bother me at all.
Do you cringe when you look at any of your earliest writing, or are you just
I'll tell you a story. that I tell writers, because writers have the problem. Most artists get lost in technique, and they define themselves by technique. You know how the sentence worked, how the did this, how the elegance of that metaphor, things like that. But novelists forget that some of the best novels were bad novels. Like, for instance, Sister Carrie. It's not a very well written novel, but it's a great book. It's a great book. Every book I write nowadays is better written technically than Devil in a Blue Dress, but none of them are better than Devil in a Blue Dress. None of them, or Gone Fishing, because art is about the heart of things, right? Art is about you giving a feeling to somebody else, and the reader is not looking, for the elegance of the metaphor. They're looking to feel something,
Right.
and so yeah, so no, I don't cringe, because I've always had my heart in that place. So at least for myself, I feel successful. And when anybody asks me, if somebody asks me, they say, "What's the best part of being a writer?" I always say writing, because that's the best part of being a writer.
Yeah. You know, Sister Carrie, was that Dreiser?
Yeah, Theater of
I've never,
Drive.
yeah, I've never read Sister Carrie, and I've never read War and Peace. A big hole in my education. Maybe I'll
Well,
maybe.
it is in a way, but you have to understand, like, back in the old days, when they just started, even before Gutenberg, there were, like, maybe a couple of hundred books that you needed to read to be literate. If you're wealthy enough and you knew how to read, you had a library, and you just read those books over and over and over and over again. You know, you're reading about, Oedipus. You're reading all of these, extraordinary novels, and nonfiction books. Uh, and as you read them over and over, you understood them in a deeper way. Now they publish more books than you could read in a lifetime in a week.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
So, I mean, somebody said, "Well, are you keeping up with the new books?" I said, "Man, I can't keep up with the new book. I can't keep up with 1890, much less, 2025." So, I mean, anyway.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for sticking late, Walter. I always look forward to talking with you. Um, and congratulations on the new book. And here it is, everybody. We still have some signed copies available, and I'm sure Walter would sign some more if we needed them.
Absolutely.
And also, I hope to see you out here in the desert
Yeah.
come
I'm looking forward to
September.
coming out again. One of the new books. I mean, I got three of them coming out. One of them will definitely. I'll be out there.
Sounds good. Thanks
All right.
everybody for tuning in. Have a great night.
Good night.
Take care.